15 years had passed since Olivia Harper's daughter, Emily, vanished without a trace. It was a wound that had never healed, a scar she carried through every waking moment. The pain had dulled over time but never disappeared. No closure. No explanation. Just an endless abyss of unanswered questions. Emily had been just 10 years old when she disappeared from their quiet suburban neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. It was a bright Saturday morning when Olivia had last seen her, playing in the front yard. One moment she was there, laughing under the sun, and the next gone. The police had scoured the entire county. Amber alerts were issued, flyers were plastered across town, and the case had even made it to national news. But no leads ever came through. It was as if Emily had vanished off the face of the earth. And now, 15 years later, the phone rang. It was an ordinary Tuesday night. Olivia had been sitting on her worn-out couch, flipping through a book she had read 100 times before, her mind barely registering the words. The ringtone pierced the silence, and without thinking, she reached for her phone. Unknown caller. Her heart clenched. She never answered calls from unknown numbers, not anymore. But some deep, gut-wrenching instinct told her to pick up this time. "Hello," she said hesitantly. A few seconds of silence. Then a shaky breath. "Mom?" The voice on the other end was soft, uncertain. But it was unmistakable. Olivia felt her entire body go rigid. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Her heart pounded against her ribs like a war drum. What did you say?" she stammered, barely finding her voice. "It's me, it's Emily." Everything around her blurred. The living room, the book in her lap, even the air in her lungs, it all ceased to exist. "Emily?" Olivia whispered. "I need your help," the voice pleaded. And just like that, the call disconnected. For a moment, Olivia sat there frozen, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. The words echoed in her head, over and over, like a haunting melody. Her daughter, her Emily, was alive. And she was in trouble. Olivia stared at her phone, her hands trembling so violently she nearly dropped it. The call had lasted less than a minute, but it had unraveled 15 years of grief and heartache in an instant. Was it real? Could it truly have been Emily? Her heart wanted to believe it, but her mind screamed for logic. Scams existed. Sick individuals who preyed on vulnerable people. But how could someone fake that voice? The softness, the slight tremor, Emily had always had a nervous edge to her tone when she was anxious. Olivia gasped, realizing she had been holding her breath. She hit redial. No answer. Again. Still nothing. She checked the caller ID, but of course, it was an untraceable, unknown caller. Frantic, she searched her call history, hoping for some clue. Nothing but the timestamp of the call and the void it had left behind. "Think, Olivia, think," she muttered, pacing the living room. If that had been Emily, where was she? Why now, after 15 years? And why did she hang up so suddenly? She sank onto the couch, running her fingers through her graying brown hair. There was only one person she could call, Detective James Calloway. Calloway had been the lead investigator on Emily's case all those years ago. He had worked tirelessly, exhausting every lead, and he had been the only one who had stayed in contact long after the case had gone cold. With shaking fingers, Olivia dialed his number. It rang twice before a gruff voice answered. "Calloway. Detective, it's Olivia Harper." A pause. Then, "Olivia? It's late. Is everything okay?" "I just got a call," she breathed, gripping the phone tighter. "A call from Emily." Silence. "Say that again?" "She called me," Olivia whispered, her throat tightening. "She said, 'Mom, it's me, Emily. I need your help.'" And then she hung up. Calloway exhaled sharply. "Did you trace the number?" "It was blocked. I tried calling back, but—" Okay, he said, his voice shifting into his professional, no-nonsense tone. "I'm coming over." Olivia barely registered hanging up before she felt her body go numb. Emily. Could it really be her? 20 minutes later, Calloway arrived. He was older now, with streaks of gray in his short black hair and deep lines on his weathered face. But his eyes, the same sharp, calculating eyes, still held that fire. He sat across from Olivia at the dining table, pen poised over a notepad. "Tell me everything," he ordered. She recounted the call, every detail she could remember. Calloway frowned. "And she sounded like herself?" "Yes," Olivia insisted. "Older, of course. But it was her." He tapped his pen against the table. "If that was Emily, there are a few possibilities here. One, she's been held against her will for the last 15 years and she just found a way to contact you. 2, she escaped and is trying to reach you before someone finds her. Or 3. He hesitated. "She's in deeper trouble than we can imagine." Olivia swallowed hard. "We have to find her." Calloway nodded. "We start by tracing the call." "But it was blocked. That doesn't mean it's untraceable, he said. I have a guy at the department who can help. If the call was from a burner phone, we might hit a dead end, but if it pinged off a tower, we'll get a location. Hope flickered in Olivia's chest. She had spent the last 15 years drowning in despair. But now there was a sliver of light in the darkness. And she would do anything to reach her daughter. The clock on the wall read 12:47 a.m., but Olivia couldn't sit still. She paced the living room, her arms wrapped around herself, barely aware of the cold seeping into her bones. Calloway had stepped outside to make a few calls, his voice low and urgent. 15 years. 15 years of not knowing. 15 years of nightmares. Of waking up in a cold sweat. Hearing Emily's laughter echo through the house only to remember she was gone. But tonight, something had changed. That call, real or not, had shattered the stillness of those 15 years. Calloway re-entered, his face unreadable. I talked to my guy, he said, sliding his phone into his coat pocket. He's running a trace, but if the call was from a burner, it'll be tough. Olivia's hands clenched at her sides. What if she calls again? Then we keep her on the line as long as possible, Calloway said. Every second helps. She nodded, though she had no idea how she'd keep herself together if she heard Emily's voice again. Just then, Calloway's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and answered immediately. Yeah? You're sure? A pause. His eyes flicked to Olivia. Send me the coordinates. Olivia's heart pounded. What is it? Calloway hung up and exhaled. The call was made from a cell tower about 20 miles outside of town, near the old industrial park. Her stomach turned to ice. Industrial park? It's mostly abandoned, Calloway explained. A few storage facilities, some rundown warehouses. Not exactly the kind of place you want to be after dark. Then we have to go, Olivia said, already reaching for her coat. Hold on, Calloway warned. If Emily is there, we don't know the situation. She could be with someone dangerous. We need to be careful. Olivia met his gaze, steel in her eyes. I don't care. If my daughter is there, I have to find her. Calloway sighed but nodded. Then let's go. The drive was quiet, tension thick between them. Olivia gripped the armrest, staring out at the darkened highway, her mind spinning with possibilities. When they reached the industrial park, it was exactly as Calloway had described. Dark, deserted, and eerie. Rows of rusted warehouses stretched into the distance, their windows shattered, their doors covered in graffiti. A single streetlight flickered, casting ghostly shadows across the cracked pavement. Calloway killed the engine and turned to Olivia. Stay close to me. She nodded, her pulse roaring in her ears. They stepped out into the cold night air. The wind whistled through the empty buildings, sending an uneasy shiver down Olivia's spine. Then, a sound. A faint, metallic clink, like a door being shut in the distance. Calloway's hand went to his holster. Did you hear that? Olivia nodded, her breath coming in quick gasps. They moved forward, Calloway leading the way, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The sound had come from a warehouse at the far end of the lot, its massive sliding door slightly ajar. Calloway gestured for Olivia to stay behind him. He approached the door cautiously, pushing it open just enough to peer inside. See anything? Olivia whispered. Calloway hesitated, then shook his head. Stay close. They stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and decay. Moonlight streamed in through broken skylights, casting long, eerie shadows across the concrete floor. And then, a whisper. Soft. Faint. Mom. Olivia froze. Her heart nearly stopped. It was Emily's voice. She turned toward the sound, her breath catching in her throat. And that's when she saw her. A figure stood at the far end of the warehouse, barely visible in the dim light. A young woman, her hair tangled, her clothes worn. But it was her. It was Emily. Tears blurred Olivia's vision. Emily. She rushed forward, but before she could reach her daughter, a new sound rang out. A sharp, metallic click. The unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. Olivia skidded to a halt, her breath lodged in her throat. The warehouse was silent except for the distant sound of wind whistling through broken glass. She could barely see Emily in the dim light, but she could feel her daughter's presence. And then there was the gun. Calloway reacted instantly, stepping in front of Olivia, his own weapon drawn. His voice was steady, controlled. "Who's there? Put the gun down." No response. Emily's silhouette trembled, her hands clenched at her sides. She wasn't the one holding the gun, but someone nearby was. "Emily." Olivia tried again, taking a shaky step forward. "Don't move," a male voice barked from the darkness. It was deep, rough, filled with command. Olivia couldn't see him, but she could sense him lurking just outside the shadows. Calloway tightened his grip on his weapon. "Let the girl go. We don't want trouble." A dry chuckle echoed through the warehouse. "Trouble's already here, detective." Calloway stiffened. "You know who I am?" "I know a lot of things," the man replied. "And I know you should walk away." "No," Olivia snapped. "I'm not leaving without my daughter." There was a pause. Then, a sigh. "That's a shame." A movement, swift and practiced. The man grabbed Emily by the wrist and yanked her back into the shadows. Emily gasped. "No. Mom." Olivia lunged forward, but Calloway grabbed her arm, holding her back. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Emily struggled in the man's grip, her eyes wide with fear. "Let me go." "Shut up," the man growled. Calloway took a slow step forward. "We don't have to do this," he said evenly. "Let the girl go and we can talk." The man didn't answer. Instead, he dragged Emily deeper into the warehouse, disappearing into the darkness. "Emily!" Olivia screamed. She tried to run, but Calloway caught her again. "Olivia, no." A gunshot rang out. The sound exploded through the warehouse, reverberating off the metal walls. Olivia's blood ran cold. "Emily," she cried again, her voice breaking. Silence. Then a shuffle of footsteps retreating. The man was getting away. Calloway bolted forward, gun raised. "Stay here," he commanded before disappearing into the shadows after them. Olivia's hands trembled as she pressed herself against the cold metal wall, her heart hammering against her ribs. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then another sound. Footsteps. Slow. Unsteady. And then, "Mom!" Olivia turned just as Emily stumbled out of the darkness, clutching her arm. She was bleeding. A sharp cry escaped Olivia's lips as she ran to her daughter, catching her before she could collapse. "Oh my God, Emily!" She barely had time to register anything before she was cradling her daughter in her arms for the first time in 15 years. Emily clung to her, sobbing. "Mom! I'm sorry." "Ayo. Shoo, it's okay, baby. It's okay. I'm here." Olivia choked on a sob, pressing kisses into her daughter's tangled hair. A groan echoed from the darkness. "Calloway." He stumbled back toward them, his face tense. He got away. Olivia barely heard him. She was holding her daughter. Emily was real. And she was alive. But as Olivia pulled back to look at her, she saw something else. Something deep in her daughter's eyes. Fear. Not just from what had just happened, but from something bigger. Something worse. Emily trembled in Olivia's arms, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The blood seeping from her shoulder wasn't a fatal wound, but Olivia could feel the way her daughter's body shuddered, not just from pain, but from something deeper. Something far worse than the wound itself. Calloway kneeled beside them, quickly assessing Emily's injury. "Bullet grazed her, she's lucky." He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, pressing it against her wound. "But we need to get her out of here. Now." Olivia cupped Emily's face, her voice soft but desperate. "Baby, we need to go, okay? Can you stand?" Emily gave a weak nod, and Calloway helped her to her feet. She swayed slightly but held onto Olivia as if letting go would make her disappear again. Olivia wasn't going to let that happen. Not ever again. The three of them hurried out of the warehouse, the night air hitting Olivia like a wave of ice. Calloway led them to the car, constantly glancing over his shoulder, scanning for any sign of the man who had taken Emily. Once they were inside, Olivia turned to Emily, brushing damp hair from her daughter's face. "I thought I lost you," she whispered, her throat tight. Emily's lower lip quivered. I thought you forgot about me." Olivia's heart shattered. "Never. Not for a second." She held Emily's face in her hands, her eyes burning with tears. "Where have you been all this time? Who took you?" Emily flinched, her gaze darting to the window as if afraid someone might be watching. Her entire body tensed. I can't talk about it here," she murmured. Calloway and Olivia exchanged a glance. "She's in shock," Calloway said. "We'll get her somewhere safe first." Olivia nodded and squeezed Emily's hands. "We'll go home. You're safe now." But as she looked into her daughter's haunted eyes, Olivia knew that wasn't true. Emily had been found. But whatever had happened to her, whoever had taken her, wasn't done yet. And Olivia was about to learn that this nightmare was far from over. The drive home was tense. Olivia kept sneaking glances at Emily, afraid that if she looked away, her daughter would vanish again. Emily sat curled in the passenger seat, arms wrapped around herself, her gaze distant. Calloway followed them in his car, ensuring they weren't being trailed. By the time they reached Olivia's house, it was past 3 in the morning. The house was just as Olivia had left it, quiet, untouched. But everything felt different now. Emily was home. 15 years later, but she was home. Olivia guided Emily inside, locking the door behind them. Calloway checked the perimeter, making sure no one had followed. The moment they were inside, Emily collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I don't know where to start, she whispered. Olivia sat beside her, taking her hands. Start anywhere. I just need to know you're safe. Emily hesitated. Then, I wasn't alone. Olivia's breath caught. What do you mean? Emily's hands trembled. There were others. Girls. Some younger than me. Some older. Olivia's blood ran cold. They took me, Mom. Emily choked out, tears streaming down her face. And they took others. Calloway's expression darkened. Who are they, Emily? Who took you? Emily shook her head violently, panic flaring in her eyes. I can't say. If I do, they'll come for me. For you. Olivia wrapped her arms around her daughter, her mind reeling. This wasn't just about Emily. It was something much bigger, something far more dangerous. And it wasn't over. Not yet. Olivia held Emily tightly, feeling her daughter's body tremble against hers. It had been 15 years since she'd last been able to do this, to hold her child, to protect her. But the weight of Emily's words crushed any relief she felt. This wasn't just about bringing her daughter home. This was about something far worse. Calloway crouched in front of them, his voice calm but firm. Emily, listen to me. Whoever took you. If they're still out there, we need to stop them. Emily flinched and shook her head. No, you don't understand. You can't stop them. Emily, we have to try, Olivia said gently, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's pale face. We can protect you now. They won't hurt you again. Emily pulled away slightly, looking between her mother and Calloway. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, were now hollow, carrying years of fear. They don't just hurt people, she whispered. They erase them. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. Calloway's jaw tightened. Who are they, Emily? Emily bit her lip, hesitating. I only ever heard them referred to as the Keepers. Olivia felt the breath leave her lungs. The Keepers. They don't just take people, Mom. Emily's voice wavered. They own them. Silence filled the room. Calloway broke it first. How many? Emily looked down. I don't know. But there were always more. Girls disappearing. Being moved. Some never came back. The horror of what Emily had been through threatened to suffocate Olivia, but she couldn't break. Not now. She swallowed hard. How did you escape? Emily's eyes flickered with something. Guilt? Fear? I didn't. A cold weight settled in Olivia's chest. They let you go? Calloway asked. Emily hesitated before nodding slowly. That was wrong. That didn't make sense. Calloway narrowed his eyes. Why? Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. Her hands twisted in her lap. They wanted me to. Olivia and Calloway exchanged a sharp glance. What do you mean? Olivia asked carefully. Emily clenched her jaw, blinking rapidly as fresh tears welled in her eyes. I don't know. One night, a man I'd never seen before came. He told me I was leaving, that I was going home. Her fingers dug into her arms. I didn't believe him. I thought it was a trick. But then he gave me a phone. Goosebumps crawled up Olivia's skin. The phone. The call. They wanted you to call me, Olivia murmured, realization dawning. Emily nodded. I don't know why. I don't know what they want. But they didn't just let me go. She swallowed hard, her voice shaking. They sent me back. A heavy silence filled the room. Calloway stood, rubbing a hand over his face. They planned for her to come home. He muttered a curse under his breath. This isn't over. A deep fear settled in Olivia's heart. Emily wasn't free. She was a message. And whatever the keepers had planned, it had only just begun. The weight of Emily's words settled in Olivia's chest like a stone. They had sent her back. This wasn't a lucky escape. It was a message. A warning. Calloway took a step back, pacing the room. His face, usually composed, was tight with frustration. They let you go, but why now? Why after 15 years? Emily shook her head. I don't know, she whispered. But they never do anything without a reason. Olivia reached for Emily's hands, squeezing them tightly. Sweetheart, think. Was there anything different about this time? Did anyone say anything? Did they give you any rules? Emily's breath hitched. Only one. Olivia felt her pulse quicken. What was it? Emily's hands trembled as she whispered, Don't look for us, or we'll take you back. A chill ran through Olivia's veins. Calloway exhaled sharply. So that's the game. They want us to be afraid, to let it go. But we can't, Olivia said, her voice steel. There are more girls out there. If we stop now, they disappear forever. Emily flinched. You don't understand, Mom. They're everywhere. They have power, money, protection. You can't fight them. Then why did they let you call me? Olivia pressed. Why send you back? Emily hesitated, staring down at her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. They weren't done with me yet. The words sent ice through Olivia's veins. What do you mean? Calloway asked, his posture stiff. Emily took a shaky breath. They needed me to come back, to get close to you again. Olivia stiffened. Me? Emily nodded slowly. They said you were important. Olivia felt the room tilt around her. What do I have to do with this? She asked. Emily's fingers clenched into fists. I don't know, but they knew you'd never stop looking for me. She swallowed hard. And now they're watching. Calloway immediately turned, moving toward the window. He peeked through the blinds, his body tense. Olivia's stomach twisted. Were they outside? Had they been followed? A sick feeling spread through her. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled something out. A small, black phone. The man gave me this, she said quietly. He told me they would call when the time was right. Calloway's face darkened. Jesus Christ. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Olivia asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Emily's lip trembled. Because if I answer, it means I belong to them again. Silence fell. Then, the phone vibrated. Olivia's heart stopped. A single number flashed on the screen. No name. No location. Just unknown caller. The room felt frozen in time. What do I do? Emily whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Olivia swallowed, forcing herself to stay strong. Answer it, Calloway said grimly. Emily hesitated. Then, with shaking fingers, she pressed accept. A voice crackled through the speaker. Deep. Unfamiliar. Calm. Hello, Emily. We're glad you made it home. Emily's hands shook as she pressed the phone to her ear. Olivia felt her breath hitch, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The voice on the other end was calm. Too calm. Hello, Emily. We're glad you made it home. Emily swallowed hard. What do you want? A low chuckle. Now. Is that any way to greet an old friend? Emily's knuckles turned white as she gripped the phone. You're not my friend. No, the voice agreed. But we are still connected, aren't we? Olivia could see the way her daughter's body trembled. She leaned in, whispering, put it on speaker. Emily hesitated but did as she was told. The cold, distorted voice filled the room. Emily, the voice continued, smooth as silk. You've done well. We knew you would. That's why we let you go. You were always obedient. Olivia clenched her fists. Who are you? She demanded. A brief silence. Then amusement. My. The mother bear has claws. Calloway stepped closer. If you think you can intimidate us. Oh, detective, the voice interrupted. We don't need to intimidate you. We own this city. And you? You're just background noise. Calloway's jaw tightened, but Olivia wasn't focused on him. She was focused on the slight change in Emily's expression. Terror. Real, soul-crushing terror. Emily, the voice cooed. You didn't tell them, did you? Emily squeezed her eyes shut, fresh tears slipping down her cheeks. Olivia's stomach turned. Tell us what? She demanded. Another chuckle. This time, it sent ice through Olivia's veins. Why, Olivia? Did you really think she came back alone? Silence. Then, a slow creak. A shadow moved in the hallway. And Olivia knew they weren't alone. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. A shadow shifted just beyond the doorway. Someone was inside the house. Calloway moved first. His hand flew to his gun, his body tense as he stepped forward. "Stay here," he ordered in a low voice. But Olivia wasn't about to let him go alone. She grabbed Emily's arm, pulling her behind her protectively as she turned toward the hallway. The air was thick with silence. Then, a slow, deliberate step. A figure emerged from the darkness. A boy. No older than 17, his face gaunt, his eyes hollow. He wore ragged clothes, his skin pale, almost sickly. Emily let out a strangled gasp. "David," she whispered. The boy's gaze flickered to her, something unreadable passing through his sunken eyes. He didn't speak. Calloway raised his gun. "Hands where I can see them." David didn't move. Olivia's pulse pounded in her ears. "Emily, who is he?" Emily hesitated, then stepped forward. "He's one of them." Calloway's grip on his gun tightened. "One of who?" "The keepers," Emily said hoarsely. "He was taken, just like me." David blinked slowly, his expression unreadable. "I had to bring him," Emily whispered. "I couldn't leave him behind." Olivia's mind spun. Emily hadn't come home alone. She had brought a ghost from her past with her. But why? David finally spoke, his voice raspy as if he hadn't used it in years. "They're coming." The room went still. Calloway stepped closer. "Who's coming?" David's haunted eyes met his. "The ones who let us go." A sharp knock echoed through the house. Once. Twice. Then the front door handle turned. They had found them. The door handle twisted. Olivia's breath hitched as Calloway moved swiftly, positioning himself between them and the entrance. His gun was steady, but Olivia saw the tension in his stance. Emily clutched Olivia's arm. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. David's hollow eyes stayed on the door. He didn't run. He didn't move. Because he knew. They all did. The keepers were here. A single voice came from the other side of the door. Calm. Controlled. "Emily. David. It's time." Emily flinched violently. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. Calloway's hand hovered over the trigger. "Who are you?" he barked. "Step away from the door, or I'll..." A deep chuckle. "Oh, detective. You already know that bullets won't solve this." Olivia's skin crawled. "Emily," the voice continued, softer this time. "You know the deal. We gave you back to your mother. We gave you a gift." Emily paused. Then, the voice sighed. "That's disappointing." The door creaked open. Calloway fired. The bullet hit something, but not someone. The hallway light flickered, and the shadows seemed to stretch, distorting unnaturally. Then they stepped inside. 3 men, dressed in black, faces blank, emotionless. But their eyes, dark, empty voids, held something wrong. Olivia's stomach twisted. These weren't normal men. Calloway aimed again, but the tallest of the 3 simply tilted his head. "Enough!" And Calloway, strong, trained, fearless, froze. His body locked in place, his breath stuck in his throat. Paralyzed, Olivia gasped, grabbing Emily and pulling her close. "What do you want?" Olivia demanded, her voice shaking. The tallest man, the keeper, smiled. "You, Olivia." The world tilted. She gripped Emily tighter. "Me? You don't remember, do you?" The keeper stepped forward, his presence suffocating. "It was never about Emily." His eyes gleamed. "It was about you." Olivia's mind raced. I don't. "You were supposed to come to us 15 years ago," he murmured. "But you broke the rules. You never stopped looking. Never forgot. And now it's time to correct that mistake." Olivia's body went cold. 15 years. Had she been the target all along? Had Emily been taken because of her? "No," she whispered. "Yes," the keeper said simply. Behind him, the other 2 men moved toward Emily. "No!" Olivia lunged, shielding her daughter. David stepped forward, his hollow voice cutting through the chaos. "Take me instead." The keepers stopped. David lifted his chin. "I was yours first. Let them go." The tallest man studied him. Then he smiled. "Good boy." Without another word, David turned and walked toward them. Olivia reached for him. "No, David, you don't have to." But he looked at her, his expression eerily calm. "This is the only way." The keepers stepped back, and in a blink, they were gone. David, the keepers. The air in the room was still. Calloway staggered back, gasping, as if suddenly released from an unseen grip. Emily collapsed into Olivia's arms, sobbing. And Olivia knew this wasn't over. Not really, because somewhere out there the keepers still watched. And one day they would return. But for now, Emily was safe, and Olivia would never stop fighting. Never. Emily shook her head fiercely, backing away. You didn't give me anything. You took everything.